Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Veronia, aka Auntie V, and today I want to talk about budgeting. Now specifically, I want to talk about how you can actually start with the process of budgeting if you haven't done that before, but also how you can actually stick to your budget, because we all know we may have been budgeting for a few months now or maybe even a couple of years, but we still struggle to actually stick to our budget. So that's what this video is going to be all about. So the first tip I want to give you when it comes to actually starting or creating your budget is actually ask yourself why you need a budget. Now you may be thinking, why would I need to ask myself this question? Everyone always just says I need to have a budget. But guys, this is really where a mindset shift really needs to come in, because if you don't actually know your why and you don't really know the reasoning behind your budgeting, you're less likely to stick to it. So one of the reasons could be that you obviously know that maybe you've been overspending for the past few months and you really want to keep it in check. Maybe it's because you know you need to save money, and the first step is probably to actually have a budget in place so that you know exactly how much your expenses come to and how much you can realistically save. Now I do actually have a video where I talk about the key reasons why you might need a budget in case you're not really sure why you should be having a budget. So definitely check out that video if you haven't already. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. But knowing the core reason why you need to budget is going to be so important going forward, because there's going to be times where you do actually want to give up and maybe your budget doesn't work as well as you want it to, but you know that there is a core reason why you need to continue to stick to it and still be consistent. So this is something that you really just want to sit down and have a few thoughts and just question yourself, why exactly do I want to budget? Is it because I know that I'm overspending and I know that is a problem? Because again, if you feel like you are overspending but you don't really see it as a problem, then are you actually going to stick to your budget? So you really want to just have a deep dive on those questions and then go from there. Now that actually leads me over to my second point, and it's to actually know what you're working towards. Now again, this is very much linked to knowing your why in terms of your budgeting, and you can see how the first 2 points are really based on your mindset, which I think a lot of people tend to miss. They always want to know about the strategy on just how to budget, but actually again, I will tell you that most of it actually comes down to your mindset before you even start thinking about your strategy. Now when it comes to actually knowing what you want to work towards, that's going to be thinking about your actual goals. So again, the reason why you're going to be budgeting is because you might have specific goals that you want to achieve. Now that may be long-term goals or it may be short-term goals, but that budget is going to be one of the core foundations that's going to help you get there. So for example, if you have a savings goal, you're going to need to have that budget to know exactly how much you need to be saving each month or each week, for example. Now if you're not really sure what you should be working towards when it comes to your personal finances, then definitely check out my free guide. Link will be in the description below. But essentially, if you are looking for things like financial independence, or you've got specific savings goals, or you just really want to manage your money better, that's going to really help you outline the step-by-step process that I took to actually manage my money like a boss essentially, but then also have my roadmap to financial independence as well. So definitely check that out. Again, that will be linked in the description below for you. But again, essentially you want to know what you're working towards, because that budget that you use is going to be the system that you have every single time that you get paid, which will help you tell you where your money is going to be going in order to fulfill those financial goals. And if you're liking this video so far, then feel free to give me a thumbs up, as it really does help to support the channel, plus it's free. Now the third point that I really want to talk about when it comes to actually creating and sticking to your budget is actually picking out your budgeting method. Now again, there is a core reason why I decided to do 2 mindset shifts first before actually going to your strategy, because once you know your why and once you know what you're working towards, that's when you can then start to decide what kind of budgeting method you can potentially use. Now there are a ton of different budgeting methods that you can use. So you've got things like the cash envelope system, where you basically have physical envelopes, and that will include different categories for your budget. And so whenever you get paid, you will actually take cash out of the cash machine, for example, and then you will allocate specific cash to each category, and then you will just take that envelope and then you'll go and do whatever you want to do with it. So that is one method that you could do. If you're actually doing like the cash envelope system, then you're going to need physical envelopes, and you probably need to have a pen so that you can write out all the different categories. There is also the zero-based budget method. So that's the method that I technically use, and it's basically giving every pound or dollar a name. So whenever you get paid, you are allocating every single penny or cent to a category, to something. So for example, you could either just write it down on a piece of paper and you can write down all of the categories that you have, or you can potentially do it on a spreadsheet on your computer or your laptop or your phone, and you can then have your budget there. Now I tend to use an Excel spreadsheet for that, and I actually have a template that you could potentially use as well. So if you are looking for maybe a monthly budgeting template, I've also got a weekly one for you as well. That's something you could potentially use if you are interested in the zero-based budget system. Of course, that will be linked in the description below for you. Then there are also other methods methods that you could potentially use. So for example, you could use the value-based budget system, and that's basically allocating money in terms of what you value most. So for example, if you maybe value food more, then potentially you could put more money towards your food budget. Now for me, I would say that there are definitely pros and cons for each budgeting method, so it's really going to depend on your personal situation, what you actually feel comfortable with, but you may also find that some of these methods actually overlap with each other as well. So for example, with the value-based method, in my case, I actually value saving and investing as a priority, so I essentially do that even though I use the zero-based budget method. Now again, I actually already have some videos where I talk about the pros and cons and talk about these methods in a bit more detail, so definitely check out that video if you haven't already. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. But ideally what you want to be doing is just trying to pick out your method and not just trying to go on a whim and seeing if you can just budget in your head, because I will tell you guys that that does not usually work unless you are so in tune with your finances and you already know where every single penny or cent goes. Then of course you probably won't even be watching this video anyway. But if you are at the beginning stages or you've been budgeting for a while but it's not really been working for you, then maybe trying out different methods to see which one is going to be good for you, because again, I always say that the zero-based budget method may not be perfect for everyone. You may decide actually the cash envelope system is better. So what you want to do ideally is at least explore some of these methods and then just really see which one is great for you. The next thing I would be doing when it comes to actually creating your budget and sticking to it is again very linked to the last point, but it's actually doing a bit of trial and error and testing out your strategies. Now again, the reason why I say that is because it's going to take you probably a couple of months for you to get used to that budgeting strategy, especially if it's completely new to you. But you also want to make sure that it's going to be right for you in the long term as well, because for example, if I don't actually like the cash envelope system, I'm not going to try and do that for months on end in the long term if I know that that method hasn't actually helped me to stick to my budget. So again, you really want to be doing a bit of trial and error, and you really don't have to stick to just one budgeting method. If you find that actually you maybe want to explore with a couple of options and then see which one is best for you, you can of course do that. For other people, they might just start with one method and realize that that's perfect for them and they just want to continue doing it. Now as a side note, I do want to say that just because a budget doesn't work the first month does not mean you should completely give up on it, because you are probably going to make quite a few mistakes when you do start budgeting. So for me, for example, I took a while just for me to actually start saving money, and I was still overspending and I was still dipping into my savings for probably about 6 months before I could actually start saving money consistently and using my budget consistently as well. And I do talk about that in the video where I talk about how long it took me to save my first £1,000, or maybe it's $1,000 to you, but essentially I walk through how many mistakes I made when it came to my budgeting process. So what I'm essentially saying is that when it does come to your budgeting process, especially if you are just getting started, it is something that you're going to need to keep practicing and keep doing before you start to remain consistent. So again, trial and error is probably going to be your best friend. Just see it as an experiment and see how you go. I wouldn't get too stressed if it's not perfect the first month. So the next thing I would be doing when it comes to actually creating your budget and actually sticking to it is evaluate how you're doing at the end of the month or the week, depending on when you get paid and depending what kind of budget you have. Now what I'm essentially saying is that you really want to actually start tracking your expenses, tracking your budget and seeing how you're actually doing. So what you want to be doing is of course setting your budget at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the week, but at the end of the month or week, you really want to see how you actually stuck to your budget, whether you stuck to your budget in the first place or whether there are things that maybe just went wrong and that maybe you really need to start tweaking as you go along as well. So for example, let's say that you thought that you would only be spending £50 a week on your food budget, but by the end of the month you realize that actually you're spending more like £75. If that's a genuine case and you realize that actually you weren't overspending, that's genuinely how much you're likely to spend, then in your next month's budgeting, you're probably going to be budgeting something closer to that 75 mark rather than the 50 mark, because again, you want to be a lot more realistic and you've actually got a baseline to go back on based on the current month or week that you're at. So I budgeted 10 for fun. Yeah, I spent 50. So it's really, really important to actually evaluate your spending and your expenses and see exactly, you know, if there's areas that you maybe need to improve on going forward, tweaking that as you go, and then again, testing that out the next month and then evaluating that the next month as well. What you'll be finding is that there are going to be certain things that you may want to keep continuously doing and even start doing, and there's going to be things that you want to stop doing as well. And with that point, that's actually going to help you figure out whether that budgeting method is the right thing for you, or maybe you need to maybe switch it up and tweak and try something else. I would be treating this as an experiment, test it out, evaluate it, see what went wrong, see what went well. If something went well, then obviously continue doing it. But if something didn't go so well, then you really want to figure out why that happened and what you could then do about it next time. So the next thing I would be doing when it comes to actually creating your budget and sticking to it is then just rinse and repeat repeating. So really being consistent every single week or month when it comes to your budgeting, because what I find is that a lot of people will just start their budget for like the first month, and it usually tends to happen in January, and maybe they'll even go towards February and start doing their budget, but then by the time it gets to March or April, they've basically fallen off a cliff and they just no longer want to budget anymore, and then they go back to their original habits, which obviously wasn't that great because they wanted to change for a reason. So again, you really want to try and be consistent, even if it doesn't feel like it's working very well. Again, you want to be evaluating the reason why. You want to find out, actually, is there a specific reason why? Is it because of the budgeting strategy that you're using? Is it because you're not being realistic with your expenses, which could also be a really big one? Or is it simply because as soon as you get paid, you've kind of forgotten to already budget, and then by the time it gets to the middle of the month, you have no budget already in place, and so you just decide actually you just want to carry on the rest of the month how you were doing before. So again, you really want to test everything out first, and don't just give up over the first couple of months. With me, it took a good few months, guys, for me to actually start creating a good budgeting system for myself. This is something that I now help others do, but what you really want to do is just be really thoughtful about actually testing it out for a few months, tweaking it as you go, and then keep being consistent with it as well. And you will find that the more consistent you are with it, the more you will get used to it, and then the more it will just feel like everything is just essentially on autopilot. Because for example, in my case, now when I do my budget, it literally takes me like less than 10 minutes to do, and for me it's actually quite a fun process because I get to plan what my spending is like for the rest of the month. So keep trying to be consistent, don't give up. And obviously, if you do need help when it comes to your budgeting, definitely check out my free guide where I do give some points on that, but then also feel free to DM me on Instagram as well. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, what are the kind of struggles you have when it comes to budgeting? I do post every Tuesday and Friday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.